Welcome to Mass Effect Synthesis, a Mass Effect AU fanfiction. Thank you for listening. Let's begin. Chapter 6, Found. July 6, 2185, 1850, Terra Nova. Bypassing several smaller human colonies, the Batarians launch a major assault on Terra Nova. Before their fleet even finishes coming through the relay, the civilian population is beginning to evacuate to their bunkers and emergency calls are transmitted to the rest of the Systems Alliance requesting backup. Unknown to the defense fleet of Terra Nova, the Batarians successfully jam all outgoing transmissions. Unknown to the Batarians, every human colony has an automated beacon that transmits a short, "all's fine" signal back to Earth every 2 hours. If it does not report in, reinforcements are automatically routed to the colony. Originally, the beacons were designed to automatically report attacks, but this was shown to be unfeasible when reinforcements kept pouring into systems where the attackers had already been driven off. It will be 1 hour and 10 minutes before Alliance Command knows that something is wrong on Terra Nova. It will be 6 hours before they realize how much larger than normal the Batarian force is, and it will be 9 hours before the tide of battle changes irrevocably. July 6, 2185, 1910, Terra Nova Defense Fleet, Kilimanjaro Tactical Room. Hannah Shepard glared at the main display as if daring it to change. She was an experienced officer, so she had fought unfavorable battles before, but this wasn't just unfavorable. This was almost suicidal. The fleet coming in through the relay wasn't just a large raiding party, it was an occupation force. The Batarians were aiming to take and then hold the planet. This was a test for humanity, and if they lost here, the Batarians would no doubt repeat this on every extrasolar planet. Humanity would survive because humanity had Earth and the Sill, but this would put them back decades. This was one battle that she could not lose. Her eyes narrowed as she looked at the numbers and the ship types. Send word to the ground, they're gonna have company. After the orders were relayed, Hannah took a deep breath. All right, she shouted, and instantly the room and the comm channels from the surrounding ships went silent as they listened to her. I want a full defensive deployment, but I want the Cape Town, Jakarta, Melbourne, Kyoto, Kiev and Moscow to sweep as many passes as they can, laying down mines. She didn't even hear the affirmation from the captains, but on the tactical screen the ships broke out of formation, moving smoothly in regulation patterns. Behind them small dots appeared, and Hannah allowed herself a tight grin. Everyone, the Batarians have come here not just looking for a fight, they've come here looking to take this planet. Well, we are going to show them that when you come looking to take a Systems Alliance planet, then you had better be prepared to bleed, and we are gonna bleed, dry. She was heartened by the cheer, but Hannah wasn't fooled. This was going to be one hell of a battle. Ma'am, Ground Command has acknowledged our transmissions and report they are readying for a fight. There's also an incoming call from your daughter. On screen, the order was automatic, so Hannah and the rest of the command staff were treated to a view of her daughter in a tank top strapping on her heavy power armor. The sight earned a chuckle. The command staff knew exactly who Jane Shepard was, they'd just never seen her out of uniform, so to speak. Most children probably would have been mortified at the situation, but Hannah knew her daughter and deliberately kept her face straight when Jane snapped to attention and saluted. At ease. Thanks, Mum. How many ships have we got coming in? It's big, Jane, a lot of drop ships. My recruits need the target practice. Jane's comment was light, but she recognized the serious look on her mother's face, and she could see the numbers that were being relayed to her. Okay, tell you what, Mum, if I take out more Batarians than the Kilimanjaro, you're buying. No way. Hannah objected automatically, not forgetting the enemy forces approaching but knowing that the banter would serve to calm her crew. You always cheat on your numbers. Confirmed, single bullet kills from your handgun, she laid the counter. And drop ships or shuttles do not count for 10. Jane scowled, but it was ruined by her grin. You're on. Her expression was challenging, but it changed a moment later, and for an instant Hannah could see into her daughter's soul. Be safe, the expression said. Hannah let her eyes convey her reply, and before the connection was closed she turned back to her crew. You heard the woman. My daughter's buying if we take out more than she does, so we'd better get to it, because she's a crackshot. Her crew grinned back at her, and Hannah slipped back into her chair, looking over at the tactical display. No amount of bravado was going to make this battle any easier, but she was the Systems Alliance captain of the Kilimanjaro, and no planet would be taken on her watch. July 6, 2185, 1950 Terra Nova. The Batarian Fleet and the Systems Alliance Defense Fleet open fire on each other. The space mines laid down mark out a defensive line, and while the Batarians would usually have sniped at them from afar, they are forced to engage. It buys more time for the defenders, but the Batarian Fleet outnumbers the Systems Alliance 3-1. The Kilimanjaro would usually be the equalizer, but the Batarian Fleet contains 2 dreadnoughts of its own. What makes a difference is that thanks to the SIL, the humans are not as new to Mass Effect technology as they should be. Fighters spread out on both sides ready to pounce on any stray ships. July 6, 2185, 2002. The All's fine signal from Terra Nova is not received on Earth. It takes the monitoring VI another 8 minutes to determine that the lack of signal is not a malfunction, and Systems Alliance Command is notified. The worst is automatically assumed and reinforcements scramble, taking up position 1 jump away. The Mawson is sent through to scout but is destroyed before any signal can be returned. July 6, 2185, 21:43. With a space battle raging overhead. The first of the Batarian dropships hit the ground. Their numbers are lowered by anti-aircraft cannons, but significant forces do make landfall. Sporadic fire is exchanged by advanced elements of both sides, but the battle does not begin in earnest until the Batarians reach the human main defense lines. Then the night is lit up by weapon fire. July 6, 2185, 23:12, Kilimanjaro Bridge. Like all Alliance dreadnoughts, the Kilimanjaro was built to pound enemies into dogmeat. If necessary, its design dictated that it could also take a pounding, and as such nothing short of complete disintegration stops an Alliance dreadnought from functioning. They are battle winners, and Hannah Shepard has never been so thankful of anything in her life. 3 hours, 20 minutes into the battle and they were still hanging in there. Pretty much all the mines were gone, but they had done their job and had slowed down and damaged quite a few Batarian forces. A couple of well-placed shots from some of her fleet vessels had finished the job, but whoever the Batarians had commanding this fleet, they were smart. They weren't rushing into battle but were taking it slow. The bastards were sure of their jamming, but Hannah didn't really care about that. At the moment they were engaged in a cat and mouse against the 2 Batarian dreadnoughts. If they could take one out, that would be a huge benefit and would greatly even the fighting. Of course, Batarian dreadnoughts were built along much the same lines as Alliance dreadnoughts. It took a lot to take one out, though, as Hannah watched the tactical screen and saw the Batarian ship slowly move to where they had predicted it would. She could not help but feel a tight surge of excitement. It didn't matter how tough the Batarian ship was, a full broadside from the Kilimanjaro was going to hurt. And with a bit of luck would crack it open. If they managed that, the smaller ships could swarm it under and she could concentrate on the other dreadnought. Hannah could see her tactical officer standing to the side, a grin threatening to break out as the holographic ship blipped on the display. A lot of people believed that Navy battles these days came down to superior numbers and firepower. They were about to show that outmaneuvering your enemy was still an important factor in battle. Dreadnought Beta is in range. The tip of the hologram had just nudged the circle that showed the Kilimanjaro's effective firing range. Let them come in a little closer, then hit them with everything we've got. I am. The gunner crews were at the ready and were more than eager to show the Batarians why it was never a good idea to take on an Alliance dreadnought, but they'd hold fire until the message could be delivered with the maximum impact. Hannah watched, her eyes cold. Fire control in 3, 2, 1. Hit them. Beneath her, the Kilimanjaro shuddered as the main cannon fired and every smaller missile tube released its ordnance. Dreadnought Beta's shields flared, covering the entire ship in a blue curtain that flickered out after a moment, and then the slower ordnance caught up and the ship lit up like a Christmas tree, and there were screams of joy from all round. The smaller Alliance ships swooped in, firing at the superstructure of the Batarian ship, and Hannah allowed herself to grin openly when it continued to explode, but she wasn't about to take chances. Hit it again, she ordered, and the Kilimanjaro shuddered again as the main gun fired. This time the round pierced straight through the ship, causing more damage before lodging in the superstructure. It stayed for only a moment before the continuous barrage made the entire ship glow, and with a scream of tortured metal that was almost audible even in space, the entire ship broke apart. It had taken them almost 3 hours to separate the two dreadnoughts, but it had been well worth it. But she knew that the same trick would not work again, and the Batarians still outnumbered them, and the Kilimanjaro was not unscathed. Good work, everyone. She praised the crews who had been involved. Now let's go get the other one. The order turned the ships towards the other dreadnought, which had been engaged by the rest of the defense fleet. They weren't faring well, but they were using their greater maneuverability to their advantage. They would have to deal with the Batarian ships which were blockading the relay after they destroyed those above the planet. What's our count? Hannah asked as they closed in, the laser defenses working non-stop to clear the path for her ship. 58, ma'am. Hannah mused, tapping one finger against her nose. The dreadnought counts as 100, she said loud enough to be heard. I don't think Jane will accept that, ma'am, her helmsman, Levi murmured. Perhaps not, Hannah laughed, but she never put any conditions on my count, now did she? July 7, 2185, 00:53. A Systems Alliance probe manages to send a signal back to the gathering fleet before it is destroyed. The reinforcement fleet just stares at the numbers for a moment in disbelief as they realize exactly what the Batarians are planning. It wasn't a raid, it was a full invasion. The news is transmitted to all colonies and to Earth. The reinforcements also noted the presence of the blockade at the relay and begin to collect asteroids. The easiest way of removing the ships would be to bombard them, and that's what they would do, right before they entered the system. July 7, 2185, 01:58, Terra Nova's Marine Defensive Line. Jane lay on her stomach, her rifle in hand. She'd have preferred a proper sniper scope, but they fired too slowly to be effective, and she was already working the crew behind her to the bone. She fired the weapon, and threw it back to them while they slipped her a replacement and then changed the heatsink on the previous weapon. Even shooting as fast as she could, they were still being overwhelmed. How many did they send? She hadn't bothered to ask the question, it was being asked often enough around her and the answer didn't matter. Until all the Batarians fell, they just had to keep firing. Jane was slightly annoyed. 4 hours and 15 minutes into the battle and she only had 25 kills to her name that would count in the little wager against her mother. Overhead the sky was clear of clouds, so the occasional flash from the space battle and burning debris falling through the atmosphere could be seen. It probably meant that her mum was up to at least 200. Fall back. The shout came from her left and Jane growled as she looked over. They were being overrun. She fired the last few shots and threw the rifle back, drawing her sidearm as the team scrambled away. 26, 27, 28, she took a step back with each shot she fired. Not even bothering to watch as the Batarians fell. They really did just keep coming, and she was almost tempted to draw her knife and see if they recognized her. Probably not, her armor had changed since Torvan after all. And if they did recognize her, then she'd probably be in for a whole new world of pain, and they already had enough problems. 29, 30. Screw this. Jane screamed, holstering her sidearm and drawing her machine gun. It rang out in a stateco as she drew back. Covering the others. Jane, come on. She kept backing up. Shepard. The scream was all the warning she got, and she spun, firing, but she wasn't quick enough and the world dissolved in a conflagration of light and heat and pain. Shit. Grab her. The words made no sense to Jane as she staggered, but something pulled at the back of her armor, pulling her over and drawing her away, and then she didn't know much of anything. July 7, 2185, 02:34, Terra Nova Field Med Station. I can't treat this. How the fuck is she still alive? The medic exclaimed, looking at the Marine hanging between two others. You've got to. One of them insisted. The medic shook her head. I can't. Not here. That much damage. She shouldn't even be alive. The Marine in question was wearing the remains of heavy power armor. It was shredded, much like the Marine's body, and a pool of blood was forming beneath her as blood ran down her armor. With that much damage, the woman, no matter what armor she'd had on, shouldn't have been breathing, but somehow she was. N7s are tough bastards. There's nothing you can do? Look around, the medic gestured. The wounded were everywhere. We are already pushed under. Stasis, that's all I can do. Then do it. We gotta get back out. Just drag her over to the pod, the medic said, indicating a silvery object about 7 foot tall. Patients who could be saved, but not with the resources available, were put into stasis, and that was the only option for this Marine. Using the occupants' genetic code sealed the pods. It meant that even if the Batarians captured them, they wouldn't get it open, not with the occupant alive at least. Most agreed that death was preferable to slavery. The medic flicked out her Omni-tool and pulled a bit of the woman's armor away before pushing her Omni-tool towards the small patch of unbroken skin to take the genetic sample. The Omni-tool bleeped and the medic drew her hand back, flicking open the pod. "Just put her in and I'll seal it up." The Marines pushed the woman into the pod and pulled the straps to hold her in place, then they stepped back. Pushing the door closed. The medic raised her hand to punch in the code to seal the pod and start the stasis field, but her Omni-tool bleeped again and she frowned looking down at it. "Wah?" The medic tapped a few buttons but the bleep just repeated. "Is there a problem?" "No, this can't be right," the medic said, holding up her Omni-tool. It was flashing a green bar. "What is it?" the Marine asked, frowning at the display. "It says she's a match for one of the SEAL, but that can't be right." Quote dot. One of the Marines jerked the pod door open. "Test her again." The medic nodded and tapped a few keys on her Omni-tool before again taking the genetic sample. The three of them watched, hardly daring to breathe as the comparison was made. The Omni-tool lit up green again. "No, she's a match." The Marines looked at the woman. She'd been dragged back from the front and the only thing they knew about her was her name. Jane Shepard. That was it, and she was still bleeding in the stasis pod. The only other thing they knew was that Shepard, like all recruits, had definitely been tested in the past for SIL compatibility and tested negative. That was the entire reason she was there. The SIL didn't risk any of their precious sea humans. "Does it say which SIL?" one of the Marines asked. The medic touched the green bar and felt her legs give out. She gulped, gasping for air. "Which one?" The woman just lifted her arm, allowing the Marine to read the name. He gasped as well but was better controlled. "You're shitting me? Harbinger?" The medic nodded. "Does it matter?" the second Marine asked. "We're in the middle of an invasion and if she dies she won't be much good to anyone. So just freeze her and report it back to HQ. They'll send the signal through as soon as they kill the jamming ships. But we gotta get back to the front." "Just let me seal it," the medic said shakily as she accepted a hand up from the Marine. A few commands were punched into the stasis pod and Jane Shepard's breathing ceased and her heartbeat stopped as the temporal field was initiated. She'd be safe until later. "I'll make the call now," the medic said as she checked that the stasis field had taken properly, "though I'd appreciate it if you didn't mention this." "Understood, ma'am," the two Marines said in unison, saluting before heading back out again. Whatever had happened here, even if it was just a malfunctioning Omni-tool, it was no longer their concern. July 7, 2185, 02:51, Terra Nova Defense Fleet, Kilimanjaro Bridge. Hannah was strapped into her chair and she gripped the arms as the Kilimanjaro shuddered. They'd gotten to the dirty part of the battle and the winner would be the one whose ship simply lasted longer. Despite the superior force, they'd managed to equalize the numbers, mostly, though they hadn't managed to destroy the ships that were still at the relay. There was nothing she could do about them but hope that the reinforcements would clean them up. The Kilimanjaro shuddered again and she recognized it as the firing of its arsenal. "Hang in there, baby," she murmured to the ship. Gravity was gone, life support was failing if the amount of smoke in the air was anything to go by, and they were no doubt venting air on some levels. She should go to the escape pod, but she was not about to abandon this fight. It didn't matter how it turned out now, she was darn proud of her crew, her ship and her fleet, and she was not about to abandon them, though she had ordered all non-essential personnel to evacuate. Most had told her to stuff it and were still aboard, no doubt helping the gunnery crews or the medics. Hannah had never been prouder, but no matter how well the battle had gone, relatively speaking, she hoped the ground battle had gone better. "Report?" The view screen fizzled but showed her a picture of the enemy. It looked about as good as she felt. Fires were raging on the Batarian dreadnought and whole sections had been caved in by their assault, but it, like the Kilimanjaro, was hanging in there. With the status of both their targeting systems, this could be decided with a lucky shot. Hannah was a realist though. Even if they won, if backup didn't come soon, the ships at the relay would take them out, but she was not going to go down without doing everything humanly possible. The thought made her snarl, and for the first time in her life Hannah Shepard felt a rising hatred in her gut. The SOCL could end this battle. She knew they were there, but they remained silent. The agreement of old was specific and it sucked, and given that some of the SOCL were on Terra Nova, Hannah was willing to beat that. They thought it sucked as well, but they were sticking to the agreement. Another shudder, and there was a loud groan through the Kilimanjaro's superstructure. "Hold on," she murmured, watching as the shots hit the Batarian dreadnought and they returned fire. "Just hold on, baby," Hannah murmured, willing the Kilimanjaro to draw upon what strength she could give it. She'd stay with her ship to the end. July 7, 2185, 03:00. The Systems Alliance reinforcement fleet, gathered in neighboring territory to Terra Nova, starts throwing asteroids towards their relay into the Terra Nova system. The Batarian blockade fleet had been expecting it and so evade, but not all the ships are able to, and the Systems Alliance keeps sending through asteroids on as many vectors as they can. July 7, 2185, 03:02. The first Batarian ship is caught with an asteroid. It blows and the shrapnel takes out another ship. 5 more ships follow as their pilots misjudge their evasion paths. July 7, 2185, 03:05. The Systems Alliance reinforcement fleet begins to come through the relay. A fierce battle ensues between the surviving Batarian blockade fleet and the reinforcement fleet. July 7, 2185, 03:18. All Batarian blockade ships are destroyed, and with their destruction the jamming falls and all the data from Terra Nova starts streaming back to Earth and to System Alliance Command. VIS with AI assistants start filtering through it, and the reinforcement fleet moves towards Terra Nova, where the Kilimanjaro and the last few surviving vessels of the defense fleet are locked in mortal combat. On the ground the battle is still being hotly contested. July 7, 2185, 03:45. The medic's report on Jane Shepard is sorted. Initially the AI disputes it, but a recheck of the data shows it to be legitimate. The report is forwarded to Harbinger. July 7, 2185, 03:47. Harbinger, who had been filtering through the reports from Terra Nova, gets to the medic's report. Upon reading it, he initiates contact with the Systems Alliance medical databases and pulls up the records of Jane Shepard's original recruitment DNA test. The test shows no match, and comparison of the DNA test from recruitment and that from Terra Nova show differences. They are close but are definitely 2 different humans, and Harbinger opens related DNA tests on known family members. Jane Shepard's recruitment DNA test matches her mother's. For all that, he is a synthetic life form, created to harvest and preserve sufficiently advanced organic life forms. Harbinger can feel emotion. Over the millennia the cycles had unfolded exactly as he envisaged, and emotion faded. Looking at the DNA results, and knowing that his organic had deliberately hidden themselves, he felt nothing but rage. He hadn't even been this angry during the 5586th reaping, when the choice for synthesis was made. Heedless of the consequences, he pushed out, initiating contact with every SOCL in the Terra Nova system. His orders were short and to the point, and his anger transmitted to the others. "I want 'em dead." The SOCL were jolted into action. As they knew synthesis, they were more familiar with emotion, and Harbinger's rage poured into them. Each SOCL, those on the bottom of the ocean and those floating dead in space, came online instantly, mass effect shields and the alternate technology they had accumulated through the combined consciousness of countless species activating as they rose up. Over Earth, for the first time in 33 years, Harbinger broke orbit, followed by about 10% of the combined SIL-SOCL forces. In SIL terms, it was a full suppression fleet, 100,000 ships. They streaked towards the Charon relay, with comm traffic flying between them and the Systems Alliance ships. Harbinger says nothing. July 7, 2185, 03:49. A veritable hail of energy weapons lances through the remaining Batarian ships from the surface and from the reaches of space. They are destroyed instantly. The smaller SOCL take up position in the atmosphere and target individual Batarian troops. Their weapons are more precise than anything the Systems Alliance has, and they can tell the difference between human and Batarian troops. 1 second Batarians are continuing the attack, the next they are either vaporized or on the ground, dead. July 7, 2185, 03:50. Captain Kaheril Balak of the Batarian Hemigani dreadnought Cholis was not having a good day. He'd told command that an attack on one of the heavily defended, main colony worlds of the humans was suicide. And he told them that losses would be far higher than expected. All they'd done was put him in charge, which meant that he would be personally held accountable because everything had gone exactly as he had predicted. The humans had fought back and fought back hard. The ground battle was still being fought and they'd only win the space battle because they had forces waiting at the relay. At least he thought they did. With the way his day was going, he wouldn't be surprised if the humans' reinforcement fleet had just crushed the sub-fleet. It really didn't matter. The battle should have been over. The humans had stationed one dreadnought and its attendant fleet to the planet's defense, and in most cases that would be more than sufficient to ward off hostiles. But the hegemony wanted this planet, and once they got it, they intended to spread out to other human worlds. So they'd sent 2 Batarian dreadnoughts into combat. Though, Captain Voorhis of the dreadnought Arato had been an idiot. He'd thought he could take the human dreadnought on in single combat. Balak had felt a twinge of satisfaction when he'd seen the humans maneuver Voorhis right where they wanted him, and then they had pounded the Arato into dust. He shouldn't have felt it. It made the battle exponentially harder for him, and there was no doubt that if the Arato and Cholis had worked together they could have taken out the human dreadnought with the far too long a name. But he had felt satisfaction and vindication, and then he'd taken up the battle. The human captain was wily. Most Batarians would have called it cowardly, but the human knew how to move a ship as large as theirs, and they were not afraid to do it. Besides, in a battle like this, the winner was the one who took it all, and the humans had drawn combat out for hours, but now the 2 ships were pounding at each other and he seriously doubted if either would ever be fit for duty again. He didn't know who would win, but when the alarms blared and the screens flickered obstinately to show him a view of the planet's surface and one from space, he realized in one instant that the humans had won. On the screens were ships. Sensors had detected mass effect fields and the ships were streaking towards them. The alarms indicated that weaponry had already locked on and been fired. In the time he had left, his thoughts flew. The new ships were huge and were not of human design. They must have been hidden on the planet already, and the humans had most likely known about them, which meant they were allies, but reluctant ones. Something must have changed to bring them into battle, but Balak did not know what. It didn't matter, and the first of the weaponry hit the Cholis, ripping into the already damaged superstructure. The few surviving support ships formed brilliant pools of molten metal that dissipated into nothing as they were vaporized. The human dreadnought was still firing. Balak felt pride that his foe would honor him such. Whoever the human captain was, they weren't relying on their allies as many would, they were still trying to do the job themselves. It was almost a pity that it wouldn't be them that finished the Cholis. More shots thundered through the Cholis and he knew it was over. He couldn't even hear his crew screaming anymore. Most of the screens blinked out as the power was cut, but one remained and he turned towards it. It showed the damaged human dreadnought. The Kilimanjaro had been a worthy foe, and as the fireball ripped through the Cholis, Captain Carherald Balak saluted. July 7, 2185, 03:50. Harbinger reaches and travels through the Charon relay. He sets a new sped record for the trip from Earth to the relay. Only the Edie Moreau had managed to keep pace. The rest of the SIL and SOCL follow over the next few hours. July 7, 2185, 03:53. Densha ducked down behind a solid-looking box. The battle was going well, but it had been more expensive than planned. The humans didn't go down without a fight. The Hemigony would be pleased though. In a few more hours, they'd take control of the planet, and from one planet, they could launch out further into human territory. The last few minutes had been hectic. There was a lot of shouting over the comms, and he frowned as he listened, trying to make sense of it. They were saying something about ships. Well, yes, the humans would be sending a reinforcement fleet. Command knew that. That's why a fair proportion of their ships had remained behind to secure the relay. The planetary defenses were already fully engaged. It didn't make any sense, but before Densha could sort the issue out, the blue blips on his HUD began vanishing. Something was taking out his squad. He looked over to Tars in time to see the woman fall and her spot disappeared. She was dead. Even in the gloom he could see that her blood was everywhere, but the shot that killed her had come from above. Straight above. There was nothing above them. His team had been in open territory, but the blue dots representing them were vanishing faster than he could confirm their positions. The bodies fell, the angles of wounds all wrong for snipers, and Densha looked up. The last thing he saw was the softest splash of blue against the darkness before he felt one instant of searing pain. Then nothing. July 7, 2185, 04:02. All Batarian forces on Terra Nova eliminated and most of the SOCL array themselves in a defensive grid above the planet while others begin to collect the escape pods. Two of the largest SOCL grapple with the remains of the Kilimanjaro, stabilizing the damaged dreadnought's superstructure and sealing the hull breaches. The Systems Alliance reinforcement fleet send over several emergency rescue crews who enter the Kilimanjaro and start evacuating the surviving crew. Other ships send their medics to the ground to help in treating the wounded. Several sea humans are sent to the surface to take custody of Lieutenant Jane Shepard's stasis pod. July 7, 2185, 04:08. Harbinger arrives in Terra Nova space. Outwardly he is still enraged, but beneath his anger, he feels a modicum of respect. His organic has spirit. She was not afraid to do what she wanted, but she would learn to bow to his will. End chapter 6, Mass Effect, Synthesis. Thank you for listening. Join me again to listen to the next chapter.